Hi, I'm Bianca Peluso with NielsenIQ, along with Michael Mandato and Josh Paisano, and we're listening to the CPG Guys podcast.
Welcome to the CPG Guys podcast. Your hosts, Shri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage consumers in an increasingly digitally driven world. And now, here are the CPG Guys.
And now let's get to the main event. Today's discussion is with NielsenIQ, and we have a firecracker of a topic, one that I have waited for and persuaded Nielsen Comms for over 6 months to get, which is marketing effectiveness. Today's consumer is fragmented across channels, is traded to private label in many categories for opening price points, and is omnichannel in nature. The consumer is picky in terms of choices, has a plethora of choices both online, offline, and to have this very discussion of how does a brand really get to meaningful marketing effectiveness, we have 3 guests from NielsenIQ with solid backgrounds and actively working in this space. So let me welcome all of them. First one is Bianca Peluso, VP of Marketing Mix Analytics, who's actually been on the CPG Guys a couple of years ago in a Thought Corner. Then Michael Mandato, VP and Global Account Executive for the media sector at GfK, which is, of course, a NielsenIQ company. And Joshua Pisano, Global Head of Product Media. Bianca, Michael, Joshua, welcome to the CPG Guys. How you guys doing today? Which corner of the country are you in? I'm actually sitting at an Admirals Club in Chicago.
I'm doing excellent and also in Chicago.
I'm coming from New York, from Long Island specifically.
And I am just a few miles away from Josh, also in New York and also on Long Island. And we're doing great. Thank you.
Josh has got the accent, so we're going to have some fun today. Thank you for joining us, guys. I am incredibly excited to speak with you today about the consumer habits, buyer behavior, what's changed in the last year and a half, and how a given brand can monitor, measure, and drive for optimization when it comes to marketing effectiveness. Brands have lost households. A lot of media is now going back to upper funnel, and being effective in upper funnel is the need of the hour. So Bianca, before we get to the detailed questions we have for all 3 of you, it would be fabulous if you gave us a brief overview of NIQ and your specific role there.
Yeah, happy to. NielsenIQ is the world's leading consumer intelligence company. We're known for providing the most complete and clear understanding of consumer buying behavior that helps our clients uncover new pathways to growth. In 2023, the merger between NielsenIQ and GfK, which also includes MRI Simmons, means we can provide the full view to our consumers across channels, product categories, and the entire shopping journey. That's why I brought Michael and Josh along to share what this means for marketers. Currently, I'm leading Nielsen's Marketing Mix Analytics for North America, and we're focused on helping clients get the most from their marketing investments. Our goal is to help clients understand which marketing or media efforts are driving sales growth, what is the ROI of those efforts, and how to spend or execute differently to improve performance. It's all about measuring and optimizing return on investment.
You've got the fun job of the hour, Bianca, because retail media, we're going to get to that at some point, part of the whether it should belong in the media mix or not. I personally think it should. Michael, you come to NielsenIQ from the GfK merger. Can you give us a brief overview of your role?
Sure. So I've been with GfK and now NielsenIQ for almost 12 years. Before that, I spent a little over a decade at NPD in their pre-Circana days. So I know this space quite well. My role at GfK, I started doing about 5 years of ad effectiveness for media agencies and big publishers. So very familiar with this space. And then I've spent the second half of my time with NielsenIQ working on the global media accounts team. And specifically, my role is I look after our global business with Meta. And of course, being, one of the largest digital platforms in the world who make almost all of their money selling advertising, as Mark Zuckerberg famously said on the floors of the Senate, Senator, we run ads. That's how they make their money. So I spend a lot of time measuring and helping them prove the value of those ads to their clients, many of whom are also some of NielsenIQ's biggest clients, whether it be in the CPG space, of course, or also in the technology space vis-a-vis the GfK acquisition.
So I come to NIQ with a little over 20 years in the media space, building kind of products and solutions that are all around audience activation and ultimately like leaning towards, outcome and measurement. And my role now in this new position is really running the global product portfolio for the media division that NielsenIQ has created. And it's really looking to set kind of a standard framework for how we come to market across the various countries that we operate in to offer best-in-class solutions from planning all the way through to outcome measurement.
Thank you for that summary, Bianca, Michael, and Joshua. In the digital liner notes of this episode, we'll place links to your LinkedIn profile, of course, NielsenIQ's LinkedIn page, and of course, NielsenIQ's website. That way, people listening in can easily connect back straight from their smartphones. So, Bianca, I'm going to kick it off with you first. It's a pleasure to have you back, first of all, in the CPG Guys after a year plus. As a leader of VP of the Marketing Mix Analytics team, describe what it means. What's a day in the life of Bianca look like, especially in these volume challenge times where media is really going back to upper funnel to acquire households back? And then what brand and retail profiles do you typically get to touch?
Excellent. Well, no 2 days are the same, but I do spend my days speaking and working to marketers to help understand how they should better spend their media. So as you said, there's lots of ways to spend their money, whether it's upper funnel or lower funnel. A lot of marketing mix really is focused on those media efforts where they're spending things on things like Meta and TikTok and all of those platforms, but even traditional things like TV and print. There are so many different channels today, and marketers only have so much budget. And so they really need to make those decisions of where should they spend, what are the right campaigns and the right tactics that's going to ultimately help them sell more units, bring more consumers back, and understand that ROI. It can be very, very difficult. And so that's where we're really able to help them, is to say, how do we consistently measure that to give them ideas and understanding of how to invest their dollars differently, and then be able to achieve the KPIs they're looking for.
And then, Bianca, what is a day in the life of a VP of marketing analytics looks like? Are you in the middle of building models? Are you telling people how to build models? Are you building strategies for NielsenIQ and for brands? Like, how does that work?
Well, luckily, again, with the merger of GfK, NielsenIQ has a robust model that we can leverage to help these clients. And so really it's around me educating the consumers, educating those marketers to say, how can they look at things differently? Some manufacturing companies are very used to doing marketing mix modeling. They've been doing it for a while. And so it's really around why would they switch to NielsenIQ, or what do they want to do differently? But there's many who are not. And so it's really starting to say, you're getting to be a big enough brand. You need to be thinking through how you're spending those dollars. And there even are a lot of publishers who are pushing to say that they want more investment in their platform. And without really understanding what that lift and that ROI is, it's hard for marketers to make that decision of should they be moving money away from Meta, for example, and into TikTok? Is that actually going to give them a better outcome?
And then, Michael, you said you work with Meta. I'd love to learn what a day in the life of Michael looks like. And Josh, I'll ask you the same question. And then, who are the profiles of people you touch on the client side?
Sure. Yes. I lead our global business with Meta. I work a lot with the marketing science organization at Meta. And a lot of that is the team that exists to really support the sales team in proving the value of their marketing, right? So they do MMMs, they do brand lifts research, they do sales lift research, they do geo testing, they do multi-touch attribution, and all of the many different kinds of research that's aimed at proving the value of their advertising. So we do all kinds of studies for them, and for their clients, because when you think about it, we are helping a publisher in many senses prove the value of their marketing to their clients. And help them understand how Meta is contributing, right? Is it helping them build their brands? Is it helping them convert lower funnel metrics into sales? So it really covers a lot of that type of research.
So I come at this from the angle of really having sat in media for the majority of my career, and the day-to-day people that I'm interacting with are either in advertising agencies or large like media companies, both traditional and more of the new online digital kind of flavors. And really the core focus that we've really been helping drive for customers is really identifying ways to find the relevant audiences for a given objective, marketing objective across the various platforms. So we spend a lot of time in media planning and helping people understand how to plan, their media and identify where to do allocations from a budgeting standpoint. And then we also spend a lot of time maneuvering that audience data into those various destinations so that as a marketer, you can then identify and target those people in those different environments to really make sure that you are focusing your spend, right? And really kind of minimizing your waste and getting in front of the right people in the right times at the right context to ultimately drive kind of the best engagement for your business. I mean, so my day-to-day is really educating people about how it all works together and how the pieces can fit. As you mentioned in the beginning, it's a fragmented space. It just keeps getting more fragmented. And so we spend a lot of time helping educate people on the best ways to pull it all through.
Thank you for that, Josh and Michael, as well. Bianca, the next one's for you, but maybe, Michael, you can chime in after Bianca. So I'd love to learn after a wacky 2020 to 23 where marketing budgets defied logic, trade budgets defied logic, everything seemed to be lower funnel. What are some of your clients' challenges these days when it comes to marketing?
Yeah, well, you said it well. There's been a lot of change in the last couple of years. And so this is the first sort of year post that pandemic where the world is going back to some of those historical spends when it comes to levels of advertising and promoting. However, so much has evolved and the consumer has so many different places that they can go and they can find brands. And it makes it harder for companies to know where to spend their marketing dollars to drive those returns. We have a stat that actually says that consumers use 8 different ways to shop for the same product. So if you think about that, the same product can be acquired through traditional in-person visits, online home delivery, online pickup at store, social commerce, and an endless array of different .coms. And so brands must be everywhere, but that means that they have to spread their marketing dollars very, very thin. And so each media channel and platform is putting pressure on brands to spend more money in their platform. So it's very difficult for marketers to determine what the value of each platform is and how to appropriately spend their budgets. So on top of that, those same marketers need to also prove the value of where they're spending money and their budgets internally to their leadership teams. So again, internally, there's a lot of pressure to spend more money in trade, to spend more money in creating innovation, but even in times like today, to take that money and put it back to the bottom line. So if the marketers can't prove out their investment and show that they're delivering more sales and a strong ROI, they're actually going to get those budgets cut.
Well, heck yeah, they should have been 3 years ago when no one was asking for ROI because we were enjoying all the volume coming from lower funnel from price increases, really dollars, not even volume. Michael, would love your opinion as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the tension between kind of lower funnel and what I deal with a lot, which is sometimes upper funnel, right? Because we can be, as marketers and as business people, very, very attached to lower funnel metrics, right? Because when you think about it, what's better than that, right? You spend X on marketing and you move Y product. And if that ROI works well for you, then everybody's happy and CMOs feel good. But as I think we all know instinctually, it's just very short-sighted, right? Because in the long term, having a really strong, healthy, loved brand is what's going to increase your baseline sales. And we actually did an analysis a few years ago. It was a study that we published actually with Meta. But what we did was we looked at the long-term impact that brand has on sales, and we kind of deconstructed the brand's contribution versus lower funnel activities contributions. And we found that depending on the category, you see quite a lot of your sales are attributed to having a healthy brand. I think in CPG, it was about 42% of sales. So almost half of your sales come from brand, right? And then in other categories like technology, which is another area that NielsenIQ plays in, it was as high as 70% of sales come from brand. So in my opinion, really savvy marketers mix their measurement strategies, right? You have to capture lower funnel. And in CPG, lower funnel will always be critical, all right? Especially for those high velocity items. And I understand it, but having a view into brand health and how marketing is driving ROI in the brand health space, I think is also critical.
Very, very well said in terms of the marketing mix itself, and a perfect segue for me to then ask Bianca and Josh, I'd love your opinion after that. What are some of the watch-outs your client should be thinking through in this, I would say, the rebound to the right media ways ecosystem that we're hitting upon in 2024?
I think it just is all that we've been talking about. There's so much that's changing in terms of how manufacturers present their brands. So one of the things that we've been talking a lot of is that consumers are really having conversational commerce. And what this really means is that their consumers are talking and discussing through messaging and AI and making purchase decisions based on those interactions. And so being able to try to measure even those types of interactions, create a level playing field to understand all of the different vehicles and being able to understand where to place those bets and understand that ROI. So it's significantly more difficult for brand managers today due to the number of different media variables and the different avenues. So you have everything from that traditional spend like TV and billboards, PR, all of those things. But now there's all those streaming, social platforms, retail media networks are another big one. And some of those things like retail media networks really feel like a pay to play. But with that proper data, you can go back to the retailers and say, we understand the importance of these retail media networks, but how can you create them in a way that is a win-win? How can you give them information to decide how much should be spent, what are the right avenues, the right tactics, the right platforms? With that data, you actually are able to make those decisions versus being at the mercy of the platforms driving the decisions.
Wait, Bianca, you're saying retail media is not pay to play? I'm just kidding. Josh, I'd love to hear your opinion. I want to ask you the question, is retail media pay to play? But let's keep it on topic here. Really, what are some of the watch outs? Is that a watch out actually?
I think one of the watch outs is just the number of walled gardens that keeps spinning up everywhere, which maybe we won't say pay to play, but we'll simply say you're entering an environment where it's getting harder to get a third party view of what's actually happening, right? You're having to take everybody's word on what's going on behind their walls, right? And you're really looking at that in this siloed approach where unless you're extremely good with how you manage, handle, and clean data, making a consistent kind of point of view across all those different touch points is incredibly difficult, and in some cases virtually impossible. So, if you go back to the old thought on a media play where you're really trying to understand, reach and frequency with the birth of RMNs, and now there's a million other media networks. You have like airlines are now media networks in and of themselves, right? So when you think about that, how are you really thinking about optimizing the consumer's experience? How are you really thinking about evaluating which touch point ultimately drove the conversion, drove the brand lift? I think from a marketer's point of view, the watchouts are maybe don't get caught up in all the flash and the shiny objects that are out there without asking the really tough questions about how are they cleaning this data? How are they normalizing it with what's going on in the outside world? How are they comparing, benchmarking? Do they work with third-party outside consultants to help kind of really give a sense of transparency and believability to the metrics that they produce? I think that's one of the biggest watchouts that I see in terms of the way the space on the whole is evolving, because everybody just says if we put our walls up, we can make more money by monetizing everyone that's on the inside, but the advertiser and the consumer are the ones that get hurt the most there. They spend more money and the consumers are the ones that have a less optimal experience in the end. So I think that would be one of the watch outs that I would maybe caution people to be more inquisitive and a little bit more persistent about demanding answers.
What I would suggest, Josh, you and me, we take a flight to the Bahamas. Let's start a CPGGUYS retail media network. It's going to be incredibly successful. Jokes apart.
I'm all about the Bahamas. That sounds good.
Jokes apart, though, you're 100% right. I do feel in this re-evolving media landscape, brands should actually not try to do it with the attitude they've typically had of, I know it all. Here's how my marketing mix should look like, and you make minor tweaks. They need to get advice on doing it bottoms up and then ensuring it actually works top down as well. So, Bianca, if I put that as the backdrop, right? I've worked for some of the largest brands in the world, PepsiCo, Johnson & Johnson, some medium tier like Revlon, and then the General Mills company. I've heard all kinds of opinions on what is a marketing mix. Is a marketing mix really meant for all size of brands?
Absolutely. In fact, for small and medium brands, it can be even more critical because they have smaller budgets and they can afford a smaller margin of error. And it's even harder for them to spend across all of these different channels and not spread their dollars too thin. Josh kind of mentioned it. It's not just about putting dollars against a channel. It's also about getting that critical mass and understanding kind of that saturation curve of where are you reaching enough versus where are you sort of overspending. And so historically, when we looked at MMMs, most of the spend was against traditional TV. And so only the big brands were spending in traditional TV. And so really it was only the big brands that were running marketing mixes. Well, now that we have all of these different platforms, a lot of the advertising comes at a much lower price point. But again, those smaller price points are meaningful to these smaller and these medium-sized brands. And so if they're not able to effectively evaluate those, just like the big brands are, then they're going to be missing out on opportunities to, again, grow their brands in a bigger way, deliver on the outcomes that they are using with those marketing dollars. And so the best way to do that really is through a marketing mix, because it is going to normalize the universe. It's going to create a consistent way of looking at the trade versus the media activities to understand what's going to have the biggest impact to the brand.
Now, Michael, through your Meta partnership, you touch the smallest of brands, maybe even D2C, and you touch the largest of brands. Would you agree a marketing mix was for everybody?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think, I think marketing mix modeling absolutely is for everybody. And performance measurement really as a broader theme is for everybody, because I think there's this perception that performance measurement has to be really expensive and really thorough, and they're used to the price point of MMMs, which admittedly is not the smallest out there. But we have solutions for smaller advertisers that if they, don't want to invest for a small brand in an MMM, we can do a geo test, right? Those are really inexpensive, really fast. And we can do it almost exclusively with data that we have in-house, right? So the bar is really low to kind of get into the performance measurement space. And, again, there's this, making data-driven decisions, right, always puts you in the right direction. Because if you're just going purely off of intuition or purely off of what's worked in the past, and even to Josh's point, there's so many advertisers trying to pull small marketers or marketers in general in so many different directions. You really need to have an idea of how it's working and where the ROI is. And that just helps you optimize your marketing budget, right? We all live in a world where we have to prove the value of what we're doing, and performance marketing and performance measurement can really do that.
All right, Bianca. So if a brand comes to you and says, coach me, I'm ready to be coached. It's a different year. Things look different. Yes, investments need to be heavy upper funnel. Where do you even start?
I really like to start by listening to them. What is it that they're trying to achieve? What is their history with MMM? Sometimes what we find is that someone has experience with MMMs before at a previous organization or with a previous brand. So is this something that's completely net new to them, or is it something that they have familiarity with? I also like to understand if the current brand that they're interested in, what their experience is with what their experience is with MMMs. So that also helps me to understand.
Bianca, I'm always curious what people's experiences with M&Ms are,
They're
especially
delicious.
if they customize them.
It helps me to understand how much change management there's going to be. Anytime you're asking an organization to think or do things differently, there's an element of resistance or change management. And so by knowing this background will help me sort of understand what type of change management needs to happen. But the next thing really is understanding where they're spending their money. Michael talked about a lot of the data that we have in-house. So knowing where an organization is spending their marketing budgets will help me to understand how much data we have in-house versus how much data we need to source from external sources. So that, again, it kind of allows you to understand if there's going to be a little bit more work on a client's end. But once we know that, we know what they're trying to achieve, we understand their KPIs, what their hypotheses are, what kind of pressure they're getting from their leadership team, then I can really walk them through an MMM to understand what are the inputs that go into it, how does the model work, what are the outcomes they can expect, and I try to use their business questions, their KPIs as a guidance in the conversation so they can truly understand the linkage between this model that can be, a little foreign to people and what how it's going to answer the questions that they're really needing to address. I think that's the important point. And then I really feel like being able to talk to various different stakeholders to make sure everyone's really aligned. MMMs are not something that gets done in a silo with one team. While it's driven often by marketing, there's lots of people who have to have input to it, and a lot of people who have to march in a certain direction once we understand. And so again, especially when there's that fight between upper and lower funnel and trade spend, being able to say that there is some data and research behind this and these decisions are made for a reason is going to be really important. So making sure all of those stakeholders are aligned and everyone's clear on what that outcome is, what the MMM can answer. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to have clients who have business questions that are even beyond what an MMM can do, and really being clear of where it's sort of getting beyond what this model can do, and either make recommendations or suggestions on how to answer those types of business questions.
Josh, as the global captain for media, would you agree? Like if someone came to you and says, hey, helps me understand MMM better, there's genuinely a new world for you to talk about?
I mean, a new world for me to talk about. I don't know that I would add much different to what Bianca just mentioned. I think that the one thing that I think it's important to just continuously remind, our clients and advertisers around is go back to your original hypothesis that led to that marketing mix in the first place. So now you're doing this MMM to do this look back and understand how it all played out for you. Where were your predictions right and wrong? And then where they were wrong, and maybe even where they were right, go back and look at the inputs that led you to those hypotheses in the first place. So could you have taken a different strategic approach in terms of the assets that you compiled to make those guesses, right? To place those bets. I think that's part of the evolution that we're kind of seeing in the space. And this is why you have these other performance products that are kind of picking up speed. MMMs tend to be a little bit, they lag, right? It's a retro, it's a look back to things. And I think where we're seeing a lot of energy and focus is really also on things that can give us, I won't say maybe as accurate or as of a read, but maybe like a more real-time signal and help me adjust and guide my spend as I'm in flight, right? But I think from that, like when specifically to the MMM question, if given that, everything that Bianca said, I would align with. I think the only thing I might add is to say, let's go back and evaluate how you ended up in that space to begin with. Let's look at the inputs that you've taken. And now as we take the results of this next look back, let's look at augmenting the inputs that we have so we can make better future bets and optimize kind of for the upcoming year, right? Ultimately, and how we're going to really place our bets in the coming market.
Solid advice from Josh there. Let me remind the public that today I'm speaking with 3 advertising and marketing effectiveness leaders from NielsenIQ: Bianca Peluso, Michael Mandato, and Josh Pisano. Bianca, if you were talking with a CMO about MMM today, what would be your advice? That's got to be, I want to be a fly on the wall.
I think it's really about getting one version of the truth. So whether you're the CMO of a huge company with many, many brands, or the CMO of a small company that has one brand, MMM will provide a consistent way to understand where to spend your next dollar. I get asked this actually all the time. If I had one more dollar to spend, or if I had to take away $1, where would that come from? So whether it's looking across brands, across channels, or across campaigns, MMM provides that consistent way of measuring the performance to identify where that dollar should go or where that dollar should come from. I'd also say that it's really critical to understand, for the model's success, is to understand what went into the model. The data matters and the level of granularity matters. NielsenIQ provides store level, weekly level data, and that allows to measure more variables and to measure them more accurately. So when you're making decisions, this accuracy matters and it can impact the outcome by 10 to 20%. So the last thing I would say is also to partner with someone who knows your business. They also know the categories. They have experience with these models. You need a partner who's actually going to challenge you to think differently and impact change.
Well said. Partner that can think differently and impact change. Michael, if I can ask you about Meta, right, and MMMs, how often do you hear from brands that say, hey, if I've got an extra dollar to invest? I thought Bianca would say, hey, give it to the CPG guys, but I'm sad now. But how often do you hear that, Michael? And how often do you say, hey, if you've got that extra dollar, because we're in a world now where we need upper funnel acquisition again, give it to Meta or invest it in this in a particular way. Do you find brands even asking you that?
I think it's a great question. I think it does. I'm very fond of Meta because I do a lot of work with them, but it applies to all of the real big media companies out there. And in my experience, data savvy media companies and all of the big ones they embrace MMM and they embrace sales lift and they embrace brand lift and they embrace match market testing and multi-touch attribution and all of the different measurement solutions in the market because they know that they have to prove the value of their advertising to their clients. And a lot of them go beyond that and they invest a lot of money in complex data pipelines that they feed to companies like NielsenIQ that enable this. So yeah, I mean, we work with all of them and we do this type of research with all of them. And we ultimately, absolutely, the brands and the other NIQ clients, the ones in the CPG space, they always want to know how to best spend their marketing dollars. And I think MMM is a solution that is great. And I think sometimes we recommend other solutions really depending on what they're looking to get out of the measurement.
Josh, let me flip it over to you for a similar thread on what we just discussed. If there was an extra dollar to spend, upper funnel, middle funnel, or lower funnel, what would you recommend?
I think it really depends on who you are as the brand. I don't think there is a very clean answer to that. I mean, everyone's always chasing the dollar, so I think it's very easy to go lower funnel. But I think, as Michael mentioned earlier, thinking about like your overall branding and how that impacts long-term loyalty and long-term like customer lifetime value, it shouldn't be short-sighted for just lower funnel all the time. I think that's just not a good mechanic. So I think it really depends on where you sit. Are you sitting in a space where you have got really great brand sentiment and everybody loves who you are? Then I might place the bet on a lower funnel activity for sure. Are you someone where you see that there's somebody encroaching on your space, right? And there's a lot of competition and you're losing, share of mind, if you will, for a consumer. Then I might say it's actually very worthwhile to spend it in the branding exercise. And I think, it's funny because in media, they talk about performance versus branding campaigns, and they're all performance at the end, right? They're all ultimately driving engagement with your brand. But I think it's a delicate balance that you have to find as the brand, and you have to understand where you sit currently in the consumer's mindset to really, I think, place the best bet, like where that dollar really belongs.
Well said, because the knee-jerk reaction would be, let's go lower funnel and take an additional unit of sales. The challenge with that is you're not really aiding baseline volume, which at the end of the day is the best victory a brand can get. So Michael, this one's for you. Other than MMM, what are other types of ad measurements that are important to brands and, of course, media companies?
Yeah, great question. So some of the other things that we do, so we have another solution that uses the same data as MMMs, but it's called an MMT, or a matched market test. And this allows brands to measure sales impact on a small scale. And the way that we do that, and this is especially relevant for CPG brands, right? Because we're using predominantly offline sales data. And Bianca referenced earlier how we have store level data, which I think instinctually everybody listening to this podcast understands. That means we literally know what sells in individual doors from our retail partners. And what we can do is, on a geographic basis, we can look at certain areas where there is a high media weight, right? So again, let's just say anecdotally, Chicago. And then we can look at another city or another area in the country where there is virtually no media weight. And we can model over a set period of time, what is the sales uplift in the region with high media weight and the region with no media weight. And that allows us to then understand the impact that advertising is having on lower funnel. We do add some regression modeling to that because, of course, we have to account for outside factors. But these tests are, again, we talked a little earlier about small brands and barriers to doing marketing effectiveness measurement. These are inexpensive. We've got all the data in-house needed to do this, except for really the media weight, which their agency can give to us typically with little to no problem. And you get really meaningful analysis. You get an ROI metric. You're spending this much on media. This is how much more product you're moving. And it really allows you to fine tune your lower funnel strategy. The others that I would add to the mix, so another one that's a little bit more tactical than MMT is more of what I think of as a traditional sales lift. And this is where you're using panels of consumers, whether it's a panel of consumer that reports their purchases or loyalty card consumers. And then we then match those data where we have verified purchases from people. We match that data with companies like Meta, with companies that have TV data, so like an iSpot, for example. We can use pixels to measure open web. And there we can get this really detailed, powerful channel level view of sales lift, right? So what is Meta doing for your sales? What is TV, linear TV doing for your sales? What is OTT doing? What is the open web and your advertising on like New York Times, for example, doing for your sales? And that's another way to do an even more tactical optimization of I'm going to put money where I'm moving the most product or in marketing channels that are causing me to move the most product. And then I know I talked about this before, but then of course there's brand lift. And that's where you're going to get your upper funnel measurement. So that's where we literally will talk to consumers. We have panels of consumers where we are allowed to track their what they see online, whether it's through pixels, whether it's through data matches with the walled gardens. And we literally talk to consumers that have seen your ad and consumers that have not seen your ad. And we are able to understand how it's changing their perception of your brand, whether it's awareness, whether it's favorability or brand love or intent to purchase or advocacy. And again, that's really powerful because we can understand, just like you measure brand health in a brand tracker, this is a really tactical view of campaign specific changes in the way people think about your brand. So all of those have a place. Again, it depends on the outcome. It depends on the outcome you want to measure or the tactic of the marketing, but we have a solution for all of them and, can kind of help build both upper and lower funnel, excitement and measurement of the impact of ads.
Josh, we got time for one more question, and I'm going to go to you for that one. But before that, Bianca, I do want to hear your opinion on the crazy world of retail media. I just asked Michael a question about measurement. Very organized, very thorough, very process-oriented, the right way to actually measure stuff. But the retail media world seems like a world of chaos. Every RMN claims they have the best measuring capabilities and the set of measurements. What do you guys even advise your clients when it comes to RMN measurement? Do you walk away and stay away with a 50-foot pole, or are you telling them you have to do it for each RMN separately, or are you trying to bring together some sort of standard here because it feels like the wild, wild west in the RMN space?
I think the best way to do it, you kind of had said before, should they be in marketing mixes or not? And we are measuring them in marketing mixes today. And I think, again, the goal is because we want to create a consistent way of measuring. So whether you're investing in a retail media network or you're investing on Meta or Amazon or anywhere else, having that consistent approach makes sense. I think what is really powerful and helpful with, again, the way that NielsenIQ is approaching this is that because we have the store level data, we can be really surgical in how we code things in our models. And that allows us to measure, again, the more variables, but be really specific. So we can look at a certain retailer's retail media network and their impact on a channel, but also their impact on themselves. And being able to understand, yes, you might be driving more sales to that particular retailer, but is it really ultimately making the brand drive more sales holistically, or is it just causing switching behavior? And so I think having that consistent approach really is the right way to go about it.
Well said, Bianca. So now I'm going to get into the world of campaigns, Josh. So a media mix and sales lift is all about measuring the outcomes and impact for a given brand's campaigns. How can brands improve their media planning and buying to increase the return of advertising? I mean, this is like an age-old question of the last 30 years. I feel like I'm getting to ask a thorough expert.
Well, I mean, I think it's just that as the landscape keeps evolving, the way you want a solution for it needs to keep evolving as well, right? And I think the beginning, though, has always been the same, right? The starting point of an effective campaign is to decide what it is that you're trying to drive. What is your objective as the business? To the point earlier, is it to drive brand lift? Is it to drive unit sales at the store? And once you've aligned against that as a business, like where you really want to focus. The next core portion of that is really, okay, now you got to define the user segment that's ultimately going to drive the most benefit towards that goal, right? Should you focus on increasing the frequency of purchasing amongst existing users? Should you go on a customer acquisition play or conquesting play and steal market share? And when clients are doing that, it's important that they use super representative data to make sure that they are drawing a very, very well-rounded conclusion on the customer segment and the size of that audience that's in market, so that they can then ultimately map it through to how it can drive, right, the ultimate outcome that they're looking to achieve. And I think, the benefit in like working with external providers like NielsenIQ and MRI Simmons is one of the businesses that was acquired as part of the GFK acquisition. We've sat in this space for decades, providing this rich audience data that is, at the highest quality, fully representative, and really helps you paint a picture of understanding the overlap of your audience with your competitor's audience, with media in general, right? That's the whole basis of media planning. But, once you've done this wonderful work, you've defined this consumer target that you think is going to drive these outcomes for your business, the next step is usually all around kind of profiling that customer. So you want to understand as much as you can about them, what drives them, what interests them, because ultimately at the heart of your advertising campaign, right, is the creative, the story that you're trying to tell. It's why they want to engage with your product. What value are you playing in that consumer's life? Why should they care about engaging your brand or buying your product, right? Why should they pick you up off the shelf versus the person that's next to them? And while price is always a consideration, it's not always the number one consideration on what you're buying. And so, I think the benefit or the challenge there sometimes for customers, and where we find ourselves often helping them navigate, is this really requires taking data that's outside of their four walls to really help them paint the full picture of who their customer is, right? So when you want to understand beyond the interactions that you have with the customer, you need to be able to kind of integrate signals that you're getting from other places, or you need to conduct additional research in order to get kind of deeper insight into who the customer or the cohort is that you're trying to engage, and to reach. And, we spend a lot of time, with our customers, really helping them refine their audience strategy, right? Because typically a brand will start with this view of a strategic audience. This is who we want to engage. And when we work with them, that ultimately results in like a number of different segments that we want to target as part of that marketing objective, right? And then I think the next step really there is, once you've now had all of this work done, you've defined these beautiful audiences that you think you're going to go after, you're going to engage for your marketing campaign. Now you got to figure out where you're placing your bets in media, so how are you going to allocate your dollars? So to your question about the RMNs earlier for Bianca, I mean, how do you compare a dollar that you're spending in an RMN versus a dollar that you're spending in TV or in digital or on social? You can wait for you can do an MMM at the end and then start to allocate kind of weights in terms of value and return. Or you can also lean into other assets and signals that are out there that help you to understand the likelihood of reach of that customer group across these medium, package that with the price it costs to get in front of the consumer in that environment and the context of that engagement. You can really start to use that to kind of refine and define a much better and stronger media plan for you as a marketer, as the advertiser that's going. And then I think ultimately then making sure that the marketer's initial intended outcome is the goal that we are then measuring for at the end is the critical component. So we often talk to kind of our clients about kind of painting this cycle, right? That goes from you're identifying an audience, you're planning against the audience, you're buying media for the audience, and then you're measuring the outcome. And we want that to feed back into itself. So you're constantly optimizing towards the goal, right, of the advertiser. The reality is in most of the marketing workflows that are out there, each environment is wildly disconnected, right? So how do you navigate connecting the right signals through each part of the marketing flow so that you can ultimately drive the outcome is a pretty challenging thing to solve for customers. And I mean, that's why we've been spending a lot of time really working on developing solutions that take insights and make them actionable to activate across the different media channels. And it's one of the reasons I was super excited to take this job running the global product portfolio for media, because with all of the assets that NIQ has to really measure outcome and understand where things are happening at the cashier, and then take that and wire that all the way back into a media plan from the very beginning, and have an agency be able to think about, let me optimize now my media plan on even more intelligence around where we're actually driving the sales of a product, and where we're losing share, where should we focus, where should we not focus. I think that's what the future has to hold, and I think that's what the actual industry is moving towards. And so as we bring these components together, the media assets that NIQ acquired when they bought out GfK, and all of the sales and share and MMM and MMT capabilities that we have, and build kind of more robust, scalable sales lift solutions that will power, future media campaigns. I'm super excited for what we can unlock having all these things under one roof now. It's a very powerful thing for us to get to.
Awesome, Josh. I was lucky today to have a great discussion with 3 leaders from the media world. Let me remind the audience first that you can find all of our content by going to a web browser and typing cpgguys.com. That easy. If you think you or your company has thought leadership to contribute to our community discussion, drop us an email at contact@cpgguys.com, and maybe you can join us on the podcast. Don't forget to drop us a rating at cpgguys.com on the navigation bar up top. To our followers, we don't exist without you. Thank you deeply from the bottom of my heart. Bianca, Michael, Josh, thank you for the spirited conversation on media and retail media today. Thank you for appearing on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you kindly. It was great.
That's a wrap of this episode. We will see you soon on another episode of the CPG Guys.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.